Hello friends! Today I'm gonna tell you about who leaves Montenegro and for what reasons. In my opinion, everyone who has left can be roughly divided into four large groups. The first group includes those whom I call homesick for the birch trees. I'll say right away that this is probably the smallest of all possible groups. I have only met one such person once. There was a mother and daughter living here. Before that, they had lived in the USA for many years and had American citizenship. Then at some point they got tired of it in the US. They moved to Montenegro. They also lived here for many years. They bought a huge house. It cost about 200,000 euros. It really was big. I don't know, maybe 150 or 200 square meters of interior space. Plus, there was a huge yard. And at some point, they said that there is nothing better than Russia. We miss the birch trees. We want to go back to our homeland. And so they left. So immigrants who can be classified in this group, I have only met once. These are those very people. The second group, also very small in number, are people who came to Montenegro, lived here for a while, maybe a month, 2, 3, or 5, quickly became disappointed with it, and also ran back to their homeland. In this group, I've only had 2 clients pass through me whom I can classify here. One was a year or 2 ago he left. The second one, literally, just recently, we're about to go close his company. He also said that he wants to live back home, that it's more fun there, and that there's not enough action here. But in reality, it's not the action they're lacking. Both the first and the second person actually worked very little. Basically, the idea they wanted to implement here, well, it did come to life, but not with the same intensity as it did in Moscow. In other words, these people had too much free time. Basically, as far as I can tell, all the complaints about Montenegro supposedly being boring are simply because people aren't busy enough. They don't have things to do. So this is exactly the same situation. People just had too much free time. Naturally, they didn't know how to fill it. They started to get bored and decided to go back to their homeland. This group is also very small. Let's move on. The third group. For the third group, I actually wrote quite a bit in my notes, so I'll be glancing at them from time to time so I don't forget what I wanted to say. This group is a little bit larger, although, well, let's say there still aren't many such people. These are the ones who didn't succeed. In most cases, these are people with some rather strange business ideas. I'll give a few examples now. I've already talked about some of them in other videos, and some I'll mention here for the first time. We had one immigrant who opened a cafe in the city center. At first glance, the location seemed perfect to him, right in the very center of the city. The problem was that the cafe didn't have a summer terrace. And this is in a country where you can drink coffee outside for 10, even 11 months a year. So accordingly, it managed to stay open through the winter somehow. But when the warm season came, nobody went there anymore. He closed down and left. There you go. By the way, as soon as I saw what he had opened, I immediately said he would close down. And by the way, no one has ever opened a cafe in that spot again. Now there's a real estate agency in that space. All right. Next, there's another example. Once an immigrant came and said, I want to open a cinema in Herceg Novi. So his idea was to rent part of the space from some restaurant, set up equipment there, and show movies for money. I told him right away that it was absurd. First of all, tourists come from different countries, so it's unclear what language you'd even show the movies in. Secondly, no cafe owner is going to rent you half their cafe for any reasonable amount of money. It's simply not profitable. They'll ask for so much money that you will end up shutting down. He said, no, I'm going to do it. But I think I made my opinion clear. If a person doesn't listen, well, that's their problem. You know, sometimes you can clearly see that the person is wrong, but you also realize that there's no point in explaining it to them. They just won't listen. In that case, the only thing left to do is just keep quiet, which is exactly what I did. I didn't argue. Then a week later, he starts setting up his own business and he tells me, I'm going on vacation to Spain. I was pretty surprised. I thought, you just arrived in Montenegro, spent a week here, and now you're already heading off to Spain. Well, I figured he must have money. All right then, go ahead, take a break, come back afterwards. He came back from Spain and said, I spent all the money. There's no money left to open the cafe. By the way, before he left for Spain, he had already bought the equipment, really expensive stuff. It cost 20,000 euros. And yeah, for some reason, he also rented a house with 2 apartments. Why one immigrant family would need 2 apartments, I still have no idea. That's how it was. And in the end, he spent the rest of the money and went back to his homeland. But here in Montenegro, there are these courses. I don't know who organizes them, some Russian, something like how to become a successful businessman. Every year, for 8 years now, he comes to these, attends these courses, meaning he pays money and they teach him how to become a successful businessman. Although in my opinion, nothing can save him anymore. The next example is also, let me remind you, I'm giving examples of clearly unsuccessful business ideas, which in fact were the reason for the fiasco. Some guys came here, they did breakdancing, organized groups here. By the way, they dance incredibly well. The guys are from Ukraine. There was one who was younger and another who was older. I had never seen anything like it in my life. I never even thought that it was possible. They pulled off such incredible tricks. Here, naturally, they had an army of fans. So kids would actively go to them, but they got worn out because you can't find a lot of groups in one city since all the cities are small. So they held classes in Herceg-Novi, in Budva, and somewhere else. So basically, they had to travel all along the coast, and naturally, these trips took up a lot of time. It was a big, significantly increased the amount of work. They didn't like it. First, the older one left, and the younger one also left. That's it. I talked about this situation with my acquaintances, the coaches. I have videos on my channel with them. There's a video with a fitness trainer and a video with a boxer. By the way, guys, unlike the people I'm talking about now, these two are doing great. They implemented a slightly different business idea and it worked out for them. And they said that, the guy just made mistakes. He should have combined group sessions with individual training. Naturally, individual training pays more. If they had done that, everything would have worked out for them, but they didn't realize this and started doing only group training sessions, just like they were used to back home. But it's hard to make money here with only group training sessions. They really should have combined group and individual training. There would have been demand for that, and they would still be living in Montenegro now. They just didn't really think about it. Let me give you another example from my own experience. Recently, I was browsing through websites. I can't remember what the central registry is called here or what the equivalent site is called in Russia. I noticed that all the companies I once started with, those focused on immigration, have all closed down. And in Montenegro, there was also a crisis, the Russian-Ukrainian one in 2015, when people's purchasing power declined. Naturally, the number of clients dropped threefold because immigration services, tourism, gold sales, antique sales and real estate sales are all very crisis-prone sectors. They are all highly dependent on the state of the economy. As soon as a crisis begins, everything grinds to a halt for them. That's how it is. As a result, almost all agencies like mine in Herceg-Novi closed down. Some people changed their line of work, others left the country. By the way, that was also an unsuccessful business idea. We survived because we understood from the start that this would happen, since this isn't the first crisis in my experience. I've been working since 2005 and have already lived through several crises. I understood perfectly well that it was bound to happen sooner or later. That's why we prepared for it. We simply diversified our sources of income. Even before the crisis, we got involved in accounting, and I also started working in real estate, in sales. In other words, you can't make a living in Montenegro solely from immigration services. Those who understood this like I did have stayed and are still working. Those who didn't understand this either left the country or changed their line of work. That's how it is. And besides all that, laziness also falls into the didn't work out category. I've also met immigrants here who arrive and just don't need anything at all. It seems like they only had enough life energy for immigration, and after that, that's it. And after that, they just lie around and wonder why money isn't falling from the sky onto their heads, and for some reason, it just doesn't. Just yesterday, I called several electricians, both Montenegrin and Russian. I call them, the phone just doesn't answer. I send a text, well, on Viber, I see the message has been read, but there's no reply. At least write something like, today I'm at a party, I'm drunk, I can't come, I'll come tomorrow. I would have said, okay, let's do it tomorrow. What time? 9 in the morning? Sure, I'll be waiting for you. But no, absolutely zero response. Then I called Sergey Bitaway. If anyone needs his number, I can give it to you. He's that kind of guy. Huel, I liked his approach. He said, I'll be at your place in 40 minutes. Now that's someone who really wants to earn money, but those others I called before apparently don't need money at all. By the way, I gave him 3 times more than what he charged me because he really helped me out a lot yesterday. That's it. Yeah. So what else is there? Yes. And the last thing I want to note is that didn't work out category is very small, just a handful of cases. How small exactly? I don't have any statistics. But visually, it's less than 1%. So almost everyone succeeds. Why is that? I mean, back home, I remember when you start a business, it's the opposite. There are a lot of bankruptcies. Here, pretty much everyone succeeds. On the one hand, it's probably because doing business in Montenegro is easier than in Russia. At the very least, because the market here isn't declining, it's growing. Every year, the tourist flow increases. And secondly, of course, not always, but for the most part, people who come to Montenegro tend to have an intellectual level above the Russian average. Well, that's just my personal observation. In other words, those who have come here are genuinely more pleasant to talk to than the average Russian, statistically speaking. And honestly, they tend to be sharper too. So maybe in most cases, people here have already thought through their options in advance. Although, as I mentioned earlier today, I gave several examples where people hadn't actually considered those options. So yes, that happens too. All right, and now the last group, the fourth one. These are people who are leaving Montenegro to move further west. Since I've been in contact with many immigrants for many years, because I do accounting, I mean, it's not like I just open a company for someone and that's it, like, all right, guys, off you go. In most cases, when people open a company and get a residence permit, they stay with me for accounting services here. And accordingly, I stay in touch with everyone for a long period of time. Well, not with everyone, but with most of them. So I kind of have my own statistics. How many people move further west? Based on these personal observations, on my own statistics from clients who have come through me, who opened companies, then closed them and left somewhere else, it's about 10%. I think that in principle, this is a perfectly reasonable business idea. People strive to live in the best country they can afford. Living in Montenegro is better than living in Russia, but there are countries where life is better than in Montenegro. So if someone has lived here for a while and then gets the opportunity to move to a Western European country, why not take advantage of that opportunity? Here's a recent example. Not long ago, I had a guy here. By the way, he didn't live here for long, probably about 6 months, maybe a bit more. He found he's a programmer, so he worked remotely, and now he's found a job in Germany. He was offered a 1-year contract for 60,000 euros with the possibility, of course, of a raise as his qualifications grow. He agreed, signed the contract, and left. Over the past year, I've had at least 3 clients like that, people who left to work as programmers in some Western country. All right, friends, that's all from me for today. Thank you all for your attention. Good luck and goodbye.